Charles David, well done. Okay, we are joined this morning by Josh Kolsrud, attorney here in the Valley. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, too.
And you've met Steve just a moment ago.
Yeah. Appreciate you being here. I'm excited to talk to you. We were just chatting during the break, and there's a lot to talk about on this one.
Yeah. Were you guessing Pennsylvania? What were your thoughts on that?
You know, I was just thinking it's not the Midwest because it's too hilly.
Yeah.
And not Florida. So, I mean, Pennsylvania looks great.
Yeah. Okay, you win.
The whole time you were thinking it was Evansburg, Pennsylvania. I could tell.
Okay, so let's chat about this idea of criminality, AI, artificial intelligence, when it has to do with some of these police investigations. We've kind of seen that in some of the cases here recently in Arizona. Mm-hmm. And you were just sharing that Arizona is actually fairly progressive when it comes to utilizing that technology with cases.
Yeah, Arizona is on the forefront of where states need to be when confronting the new challenges from AI and different technological advances. And I'll give you an example. So in child exploitation cases, otherwise known as child pornography, the new argument from defense attorneys is that some of the images are generated by artificial intelligence, so that there's arguably no victim. And prosecutions have had trouble prosecuting those cases because the statutes are specifically written to protect victims of crimes. Now, Arizona, though, the way that our statute is written and amended, actually, it does cover those AI images. But there's still some gray area because if the AI creates an image that isn't completely human, like it has a tail or it adds some like elf ears or something,
right?
Does that still count? And that hasn't been litigated yet.
Wow, that's not something I've ever considered before. So there's active cases going on with this question being posed already. I mean, I feel like I've only seen AI images in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Over half the states do not have amended or updated laws that actually deal with this type of defense. It goes to show that the law is almost always behind the times.
How are we were chatting about how criminals seem to be ahead of the time when it comes to utilizing artificial intelligence or any type of high tech, and that kind of forced police agencies and investigators and detectives to really embrace the technology and find ways to use it in some of their work.
Oh, absolutely. Like, in fact, the Scottsdale Police Department is using a version of ChatGPT through their Axon system. Their Axon is what their body camera is. And they have this software that writes police reports based on what was recorded on their Axon body cameras. And it actually is very accurate and cuts the time that it takes to make these reports down. I think they save at least 30 minutes per report. But also, law enforcement agencies are utilizing other technologies as well. For instance, they can get a warrant and they want to find out who's in a certain area. They can find out everybody who has a cell phone in that area and kind of narrow down where they think the criminal is or where the crime is happening. They also use AI software to predict where the high crime areas are in order to send more patrol vehicles to a certain area. Now, this does come with a certain level of controversy. The opponents, the people against that type of technology are saying that, the AI is relying on information that was biased or, people were overly prosecuted based on, race or gender or whatever, and prosecuted unfairly. So they're being stereotyped, and then police officers are going into areas that may not have as much crime in reality. That's what the opponents are saying.
I think it's interesting. We've seen, I'm sure many of you who are chiming in, maybe you can share your thoughts on this. On YouTube, you can look up, for example, a Britney Spears song or Kanye West song, and it's not really their voice.
Yeah.
It's an AI generated voice. And sometimes that can also be used. Criminals are using AI to then impersonate certain people or make them say something, and then they release it on social media or online somewhere. And that is making the situation just absolutely wild. What are some of the cases you've heard of that have surprised you?
It's big business, billions and billions of dollars. In fact, the Mexican cartels have probably a third of the money that they take in is built from this type of scam that you're talking about. And
how so? How do they use that?
Well, I'll give you an example, a personal example. So my grandparents were called by someone who was mimicking my voice, and this person sounded just like me, same tone, inflections, sounded scared and afraid, and said that I was in prison in Mexico and that I desperately needed money right now.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. But luckily, my grandparents.
She's like, I better call him.
Yeah, well, they didn't have any money to give, but they called my dad and asked him if I was okay. And luckily, they were able to tell my grandparents that everything is fine.
Oh my goodness, how scary though for your grandparents.
It's an emotional scam,
right?
It is.
Yeah.
And, we did something after that to kind of make sure that this doesn't happen again. And I recommend that everybody does this, and that is, have some type of code word or phrase that you have with family members. So if there ever is a real emergency where money is desperately needed really fast, use that code or phrase. It's something that you all agree on that only you would know to make sure that this isn't some type of scam.
That's a really good idea right there. I'm not going to ask you what your code word is because that would defeat the purpose. But you make sense as a perfect target for that because you're doing this right now. I mean, really, all three of us are perfect targets for this. There's so much input out there. I think if maybe you don't have a lot of YouTube videos of yourself out there, things like that, it's probably a little bit harder for AI to get a perfect match of your voice. But there's hours of you online that information can be pulled from.
You make a great point. And another thing that I recommend to my clients is that they not allow people that they don't know access to their social media. So if they do post things on Instagram or Facebook, that they limit that to just friends or people that they know. So those images and voice recognition cannot be captured by nefarious individuals. And talking about capturing your voice and your likeness, law enforcement is doing this as well. They're going onto social media and capturing everybody's likenesses so they can identify people in the future. And another thing that law enforcement is doing that's a little controversial is that we saw this in the Brian Kohberger case. If you remember, that was the case in Idaho where the defendant murdered four women who were going to that college, including one that was a native here in Scottsdale. And what they did was they found DNA on the knife sheath that was left at the home. However, when they ran the test, there were no direct matches because Brian Kohberger's DNA was not in the system. So what the FBI did, and again, this is controversial, they took the DNA and created a profile on different genealogical websites like Ancestry.com, 23andMe, and they were able to create a profile of who Brian Kohberger's family members were and then be able to focus and narrow it down to just him. And this is something that anybody can do to find out who, the DNA belongs to. But law enforcement is doing this type of